Monica, welcome to Podcastina.
Hello, Galina. It's so good to be here with you.
It's so good to have you. We're going to get right into the thick of it. All right, a couple is experiencing intense resentment on both sides. Can they walk that back, or is the relationship doomed?
Well, I would say the relationship is very rarely doomed. It's very, very common for couples to feel resentment on both sides of the relationship, especially if they've been together for a long time. The longer a couple has been together, the more worn those grooves are of the couple's dynamic. So, a lot of times, the couples will start out and they won't have really great communication skills. And so, they'll try to talk about topics that are hard for them to talk about, or that they disagree on, or that are important to them. And those conversations don't go well. Either one or both of them reacts or responds in their inner child kind of knee jerk reaction. So they'll either withdraw, or they'll go one up, or they'll try to control, or they'll what we call unbridled self-expression, where they'll just talk and talk and talk and talk and talk, and blame their partner for lots of different things. There's so many things that can go wrong when a couple's communicating. And so anytime you're not getting what you think you deserve in your relationship, resentment builds. Or if you're not speaking up about something that's bothering you, resentment forms. And so yeah, there's lots of opportunity for resentment in relationships, because one thing I always say is relationships are disappointing. I mean, that's just part of life and relationships. You're an imperfect human married to another imperfect human. So, of course, there's going to be a lot of disappointment. That also breeds resentment. So, you can walk a lot of this back, but most of the time, you're going to need help in figuring out A, what's going wrong, B, what that dynamic is that's dysfunctional, and C, skills to do it better.
So there is hope.
Always hope.
I think a big issue for people is maybe a lack of self awareness or a lack of skill to identify what it is that we're feeling in the first place. What would you say to a
Mm.
couple so they could even identify that there's resentment there if they haven't thought about it that way, or they aren't familiar with that term and what it means? How can they identify that that exists within their dynamic?
Yeah. Well, a big part of having a successful relationship is your own self esteem, or your sense of, self regulation, understanding yourself. So you're right, self awareness. And so, one thing that I work with couples a lot around is the individual partner's self esteem, and how to kind of pick yourself up when you're feeling shame, or you're not feeling good enough, or you're feeling resigned. And so, understanding that your voice, that your opinions, that your preferences and ideas matter and are important in the relationship is a really important first step. So that's something we work with a lot of couples on. And one of the Hollywood movies that's one of my favorite movies of all time is The Runaway Bride with Julia Roberts and Richard Gere. And in that, it's a very, they talk about this concept, or display this concept, where Julia Roberts has a really hard time walking down the aisle and completing the I do. And it's because she self abandons so much. So, her hairstyle and the kind of eggs she likes changes depending on the man she's with. And so it isn't until she can take some time on her own and really figure out how she likes to eat her eggs, and how she likes to style her hair, and what she wants to wear. And like, she becomes like a whole human on her own, with her own ideas and preferences that she feels like are important, is when she can then commit to Richard Gere. But it was, him that pointed out to her that, she doesn't know what she wants. She doesn't know what she likes. And so a lot of us have to take some time, either single Or if you're already in a relationship, it's really important to really honor yourself enough to figure out what are your preferences, what is your voice, what do you have to add to the relationship, and really lean into that. And you might get it wrong sometimes. You might try something out, and it makes me think of high school when you're like trying to figure out your identity and figuring out how to fit in and things like that. It's really important to have a sense of your individuality and what makes you you, and you can do that within a relationship. But it's that work is just so important.
You hear that a lot, and it's good to see it in the context of a relationship too, that you still have to do the inner work and, so to speak, keep your side of the street clean. I wanted to ask, what are some of the communication tactics that people can employ? They've identified there's resentment there. How do they sit down and have an honest conversation about it?
Well, the reality is a lot of these couples that once they identify there's resentment there are they're going to want or need some help with this, because like I said, a lot of that resentment started building and is there because their communication skills aren't, that strong, and, conversations in the past didn't go well. And so a lot of times, if you find the root of that. Now, here's the thing that's really important to understand is you can learn skills. I mean, information is cheap. You can go on ChatGPT, you can watch YouTube videos, listen to podcasts, you can listen to this podcast right now, and I can give you all of the communication tactics that are available, right? So it's not that you don't have communication skills. It's just that what happens is when you get into a conflict with your partner, your inner child kind of kicks up, and the response is fight, fly, fight, flight, fawn, or freeze. So those are the things that our bodies, our brains, our systems will do to protect ourselves. And the reality is once you're triggered and once you're in this, we call it first consciousness state, you don't have access to those tools. You're not going to use them. Even if you know them all, you your objective isn't to work things out. It's not to make things better. It's not to, draw upon these skills. It's to protect yourself. You don't want to get hurt. And you're back in that little 15, 8-year old, 6-year old version of yourself where you're like, I have to protect myself at all costs. And so usually you're going to employ some sort of losing strategy. And all of this is happening subconsciously in your brain. You can't see it until someone points it out to you, or you've done the work to be able to see, okay, yes, this is my knee-jerk reaction. This is how I protect myself. I either wall off, or I get really boundaryless and try to fix things, or I flee and withdraw from the whole situation. So most of us are operating on some form of protection like that. And it isn't until we do that work, really with a counselor or a therapist or a coach that can help us see that. And then we have choice. We're like, oh yeah, this is what I do to protect myself. I put up the wall, the impenetrable wall, and I don't let my partner in. I don't get vulnerable, and I don't really ask for the things that I need. But once you can see that, once you start to figure out what it feels like in your body when your brain is offline like that and in protection mode, then you can make a different choice. You can do something about it. You can learn how to down regulate back into that wise adult. And when you have your wise adult online, then you can access those skills. But that's the tricky part, is like we think we can read books and listen to podcasts and like get the skills. And
Right.
once we have the skills, it's all good. But that's where people really struggle.
Yeah, it's like they miss the forest for the trees, where you think you have the skills, but if you're not adept at figuring out, oh, I am walling off, I do stonewall, my gut instinct, whatever it is, that childlike mechanism that we use to defend ourselves, I think you don't see it until someone points it out to you. So you're right. Like, go get help. And I don't think the partner is going to be the correct person to point it out to you, especially if they're also triggered.
Exactly.
So what is it
Exactly. You're right.
that, oh yeah, sorry. What is it that led you to write a book called Bad Marriage Advice? Like, what spurred that?
Yeah, so it's a cool story. So I have four children. My oldest is 21 and in college. I have an 18-year-old daughter who's about to graduate from high school. I have a 16-year-old sophomore in high school and a 13-year-old seventh grader. And so my oldest he's been dating this girl. He thinks she's awesome, and he let us know that he wanted to marry her. And immediately I was like, oh my gosh, first of all, they're so young, and second of all, I have so much experience and things that I want to share with them. And so I sat down to just write them kind of like a love letter. Like, here's my experience of 23 years of marriage and working with couples and the biggest problems, and seeing marriages, be put back together, just like we started this episode when there was like, it seemed like there was no hope and there was so much resentment, versus couples that didn't stay together. So I felt like I had all of this to share with him. And so I sat down to write him this note, which turned into a book.
That's remarkable. Can we go through some of the bad pieces of marriage advice?
Absolutely. It really was so fun to write because I was thinking about like what would have been most helpful to me when I was getting married, very young as well. And I remember just soaking up all of this advice. Like when an older couple would come through the line or at my bridal shower, I remember there was like, index cards with advice, and like, you just advice is everywhere. And so I just remember thinking some of the advice that I got when I was young, newly married or engaged turned out to be terrible advice, like caused a lot of pain in the beginning of my marriage, until I realized like this is really actually very bad advice. And so as I sat down to start writing it, I kind of realized that a lot of the big problems that people have in their marriage stem from some of this really, really bad advice that was probably well meaning, right? Like nobody's trying to destroy my marriage. Like they all feel like it's good advice. And a lot of it's just outdated.
Should we start with the worst piece?
Yeah, I don't know if I could pick just one, but I will say that this is something that we hear. I'll start with a fun one because we hear this a lot. Happy wife, happy life. How many times do you hear that? Like, I
Mostly from
cringe.
men.
Yeah, it's true. And I'll be scrolling through social media and I'll see like, it's like one of those, like a guy walking around with a microphone and he's like, stops a couple in the street and he's like, give us your best advice. And the dude, some old dude is like, she wears the pants. She's always right. She gets whatever she wants. That's the way to stay happy. Right. And you're like, and I'm like, okay, honestly, like talk about resentment, right? You're going to have a relationship where only one partner gets what they want. Like that makes zero sense. And it's probably one of the most dangerous, because eventually the husband who is never getting what he wants, that is always deflecting to the wife. It's a lot of responsibility for the wife. Like nobody wants to be the only one responsible for everything that happens in the marriage. But also, you have a husband who's like, she's always right. She always gets what she wants. He's going to start being very resentful and eventually withdraw from the relationship. Like, I mean, I have no voice. Why would I stay here? So, yeah, the happy wife, happy life, horrible advice.
What do you think the intentionality behind that was? Do you think it's just men kind of not wanting to put up resistance, or like where did that come from?
I mean, it probably has its roots in some sort of chivalry, or, maybe combating that idea that the man is the head of the household and makes all of the decisions or something like that. Like, I mean, it does seem a little bit chivalrous. And when you hear it, you're like, oh, that's so romantic. Yeah, like for sure the wife gets everything that she wants. You want to make sure that she's happy, right? It also probably stems from this idea that, women are kind of like the nagging, everything wife. And, if she's not happy, nobody's happy, all of these, which also that's not very honoring to a woman anyways, right? Like if mom's not happy, nobody's happy, right? Like, you know, again, that's a lot of responsibility that lays on the shoulders of the wife. But I can see how it would be like, kind of a cool idea at first. But what happens is it dampens communication, because if you're constantly just, relying on one partner to make the decisions, then you're not fostering good communication, right? It's just like, well, I don't know you know, if I give my opinion here, this is the husband thinking, like, if I give my opinion here and she doesn't like it, well, she's gonna be upset. So we'll just do what she wants, instead of being like, well, okay, I hear you that you want this. Here's what I think is right, and let's come up with a good collaboration on it. So that actually brings me to the next piece of really, really bad advice that I'd love to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to kind of add to that, I can see where it's damaging to be like, oh, happy wife, happy life, because you see it all the time where a woman does want help with decision making. Like, take, for example, some kind of renovation when she's like, please, I beg of you, tell me which paint color to pick. And the lack of
Right.
participation is also going to create friction just as much.
Totally. Cause yeah, I mean, maybe the husband doesn't care that much, but like care enough to care about her feelings, right? Like maybe, maybe some dude's going, I don't care. It all looks green to me, paint it green. I don't know. But like the difference between that, like, I don't know, dude, make a decision. I don't care. And like, oh, I can see this is a really important decision to you. Let me look, and if you really don't care, it's like, well, I mean, this green looks a shade brighter and it might make the room a little brighter. Like, listen, I care about the things that you care about. And maybe I don't have a really strong opinion about which color green you should paint the office. But if it's important to you, I'll weigh in.
Right. Simple enough. Like, that's such a good workaround, actually, for if they really don't care. Just be like, well, at least I'll put my 2 cents in somehow.
Yeah.
What's next?
So, have you ever heard, and I hear this all the time because I love, one of my favorite pastimes is just walking up to older couples and saying, what's the best marriage advice you have? Like, how did you get to where you are? And I hear all the time, marriage is about compromise. You have to learn to compromise.
Yes.
Now, Galina, tell me, what do you think of when you hear the word compromise?
Trying to find a win-win, but probably arriving at a lose-lose.
Right. It's like I give a little, they give a little, and actually nobody really gets what they want because we all just gave a little, right? Compromise over time is going to create tons of resentment. Not only that, but it's going to create scorekeeping, right? It's like you got what you want last time, it's my turn. or
Mm-hmm.
or the other way around. Like I always pick the restaurant, you pick it this time, right? We're compromising. So there's really no need to compromise in modern marriage, especially if you have good communication skills. So this is like how you can tell all of this bad advice from the better advice. It requires a higher level of communication skills, right? So if we want to not compromise, it means we get really curious about ourselves and our partner and our positions on things. So if you're talking about, you can talk about something really simple like where should we eat for dinner? That's a decision that couples make all the time on a daily basis. Or a bigger decision like how do we educate the kids? Do we send them to public school, private school, homeschool, right? There's lots and lots and lots of options. Well, if you compromise, well, that means like I don't, sure, we can, if maybe I want to educate the kids in a private school and that's too expensive. And he wants to do homeschool, which, is too much work. And so let's just send them to public school. That way, neither of us gets actually what we want. And, you've come up with something that's like super random, but it's a compromise.
Mm-hmm.
So
Technically.
how about figure out what is it about the private school that feels really important to me, right? Like it's, maybe it's the curriculum, maybe it's the credentials of the teachers, maybe it's the location in town where it is, right? And then what's super important to my spouse about homeschooling? Maybe it's, again, controlling the curriculum, maybe it's keeping them out of danger, maybe it's whatever it is. You get really curious about yourself. What do I love about this option? And your partner, what do they love about that option? And then you make sure that those are the non-negotiables. Then you get to work creating something that encompasses all of that. So maybe we homeschool, but maybe 2 days a week they do classes at the private school. That way you've come up with a solution that not only takes into account what's most important to one partner, but also what's most important to the other partner. And there's countless ways to do this. So the story I tell in the book, it's kind of a funny story, is on my 7-year wedding anniversary, my husband and I went on a trip to San Francisco. And I was raised by a little more affluent family. We love seafood. And so anytime I go anywhere on the coast, I'm like, I want the best seafood. I want a nice high-end restaurant where I can sit on the water and watch the sunset. And that is the romantic dinner that I envision on our anniversary. Now, my husband doesn't think any part of that sounds good. He doesn't like seafood. He doesn't like spending a lot of money on food at all, right? And so he's like, wow, like none of that sounds good to me. Well, if we subscribe to the happy wife, happy life, then my husband is just going to suck it up, go eat seafood on the wharf and pay a bunch of money and just be resentful, right? That sucks. But happy wife, happy life, or we could compromise and maybe we find a restaurant that's less expensive that serves seafood and burgers, but neither of them are very good. And then both of us are sitting there going, well, that was a great anniversary, right? Like neither of us really got anything that we wanted. Or we could collaborate. And what that looked like for my husband and I was that I chose the restaurant that I really liked. It was a really nice high-end restaurant right on the wharf. We got to watch the sunset over the water. I ordered my crab legs dipped in butter and I was super happy. And guess what my husband did? He walked across the street to In-N-Out. He got himself a burger that he loved and a milkshake, and he brought it into the really nice restaurant. Now, I was a little bit embarrassed, and the waitress came over and was like, sir, you can't bring that in here. And he was like, listen, it's my anniversary. My wife wanted to eat here, and I don't like anything on your menu. And she was like, give me 1 second. She went and got a really nice plate and a glass from the bar. She poured his milkshake in, plated his burger and French fries, and got rid of the In-N-Out wrappers, right? And we sat there and we had a beautiful dinner. We watched the sunset over the water and it was super romantic. He didn't have to spend a fortune on food he didn't like. I got everything I wanted. It was the perfect collaboration. Now, there's lots of ways we could have done that, but that worked perfectly for us. And it's kind of like the, framework for our marriage, right? It's like I get what I want, the things that are really important to me, and he gets what he wants, the things that are really important to him. We can take, my opinions, my experience, and merge them perfectly with his opinion. And that's the thing, is we come from two very different walks of life. And most people, they do marry people that are very different from them. And so you get different experiences, different opinions, different preferences. But you can see that as either this is really annoying, like we never agree, or you can see that as a strength. Like, look at all this experience and opinion that we have to draw from, right? Like we can cut together, we can come up with something even better than either one of us could have ever come up with on our own.
That's such a great story. I love the language of collaboration around that because that kind of expands it into a new area, a realm that people probably don't consider with that. Because I think, yeah, I wouldn't have taken the don't compromise one as a bad piece of advice, but when you lay it out like that, it really makes the most sense that instead of anybody losing ground, there is a way to just get what you want on both ends.
And there's tons of ways to both get what you want, right? I mean, there's tons of solutions that you can come up with when you put your heads together, but it does take a little bit of time and effort, right? You have to both be willing to say, this is what's important to me. This is what's important to me. How can we make the things that are important to both of us part of this solution?
How would you implement that with something that's kind of a bigger life decision, like let's say a partnership, they can't agree on what city to live in. Somebody gets a job in a different city. It's something of that magnitude where you can't both have what you want. How would you face that?
Yeah. I mean, that's a great one. And the same thing, it's like what's important to you and where we live, and what's important to your partner and where you live. I mean, is it the job? Is it how much money you're going to make? Is it, the proximity to the city or the suburbs? Is it being close to family? Like, can you take the things that are most important to both of you and come up with a collaboration? So maybe, it's like we have a job offer in New York City or a job offer in Texas. And it's like, what about those states? You take them and you put them both together, and it's like, how much money are each of them? What's the cost of living? And, if it's like, I don't want to live in the big city, maybe there's a suburb outside of New York that, that could fulfill both of what's required, right? So sure, you're both maybe going to have to give a little bit, but you can hold on to those things that are most important to both of you.
What's another piece of terrible marriage advice?
Well, this one I see being really destructive. And I'm actually working with a couple right now that is so tightly ascribed to this piece of advice that it's really causing a lot of stress and destruction in their marriage. And that is that you hear divorce is not an option. Take it off the
Mm,
table. Like, no, yeah, like we don't even say the D word in our family, right? Like, that is absolutely undeniably the worst marriage advice, because if you feel locked in to your marriage, like there's no option for divorce, then what motivation do you actually have to work on making things better? So this couple that I'm working with right now, I'm actually just working with the husband because the wife refuses to come to therapy. Her thought is that, why would I go to therapy? Like, I'm not struggling in any way. Whereas the husband is like, man, I am so really having a hard time in this marriage because after 20 years, the wife has never, ever, ever apologized for anything or taken accountability for anything. But why would she? Because they're locked in. So she doesn't have to work on the marriage. She doesn't have to apologize for anything she's ever done. Why would she? He's stuck with her. And so I think the idea behind take divorce off the table, or we don't speak about that, or it's not an option, first of all, it's a big lie. Divorce is always an option. Like, you're never actually really locked in. Divorce is not that difficult, right? Like, it's a choice always. It might not be the best choice, might not be the desirable choice, but it's always a choice. But also, um, it, it, I lost my train of thought. But but also this idea of divorce is on the table makes it so that each partner is constantly thinking about and working on how to better the relationship and make it a better situation. Oh, I know what I was going to say. Okay, so the idea of you're locked into your marriage and there's no choice. Like, I think that the idea behind that was creating more commitment.
right.
But if you're locked in, it's very different than I choose to be in this marriage. Think about if you're in a marriage and you can't get out of it, you're stuck in that marriage. I mean, it doesn't mean a whole lot that, yeah, like we've made a commitment to each other and we're stuck with each other for better or for worse, and we're not going anywhere. Or like, for better or worse, I choose you. Like, I see your weaknesses. I know your strengths. Like, you know, I get it. You make mistakes and you've made a lot of them, right? But like, guess what? I still choose to be here with you. I still choose to work on this with you. I still choose to grow and evolve and become the best version of myself with you. And I hope that you will choose me as well. That's very different commitment than you're stuck with me, deal with it.
In that way, having divorce be on the table is actually sounding like a more romantic option, right? Like the choosing I would rather someone not necessarily threaten divorce, but obviously to know that that could be a consequence, it almost implies like you do have to try harder.
Yeah. And you should need to try harder. Now, this is an unpopular opinion. I do get in trouble sometimes for sharing this, but I feel like it's really important. So when I get clients that come to me and they're like, my spouse refuses to come to therapy or work on the relationship, I talk to them about the choices that they actually have. Now, you want to do this from a loving place and not an angry place. So that's what's really important. But you go to your partner and you say, hey, I would really love to work on our relationship with you. And so I've made an appointment with this coach that I trust. And I've made the appointment for Friday at noon. I would love for you to join me. And then you say that every single day. And if your partner is still not willing to budge, say, listen, working on this relationship is really important to me and I have choices. So I will not be sleeping in the same bedroom as you until you agree to come to therapy. Or I am no longer going to be making dinner until you decide, until you will work on this with me. Or you can say, I'm not going to go out with you socially, or we won't be having sex, or whatever it is. These are all choices. These are all gifts that I give and put into the relationship. And if you have a partner that's not willing to also work on and put into the relationship, you can take these things away. That's sort of just walking out, right? Like, if you don't come to
Mm.
therapy with me, I'm out of here. Like, you could do that, but you could just start taking away the things that, make the relationship stable and make the relationship rewarding for the other person. So that's really important to know, that you always have choice in your marriage. So even if you said, for better or for worse, these are the things I'm going to do and this is how I'm going to contribute to the marriage, if your partner isn't, willing to reciprocate or willing to work on the things in your marriage that are important to you, then you can start taking away the things that are important to them.
Mhm. Where do you stand on the advice never go to bed angry?
Oh, I hate it. I think that's chapter 6 or something. Yeah, that is the worst advice ever. I cannot tell you how much sleep I lost in the beginning of our marriage, because that was probably the main one. Like, that was like all the older couples that I really respected, that I was like, these people are so happy. They would come through the line and they would be like, always make sure that you pray together before bed and never go to bed angry. And I was like, you know what? Praying together before bed, awesome idea. Not going to bed angry, definitely not good advice, right? Because if you think about it, how like logical and rational and able to create a good solution and communicate well are you when you're exhausted?
Yeah.
Not good at all. So I like to use the acronym HALTS: hungry, angry, lonely, tired, or stressed. If you're in any of those states, especially tired, your reasoning and ability to have empathy and compassion and all of the skills that it takes to actually work through something go out the window. So a lot of times, a lot of fights, or they start right before bed when you're tired. So for my husband and I, that was the case, right? Like, we would both be grumpy and irritable, and somebody would do something stupid, like leave their socks on the floor or something, and like full-fledged, full-blown fight right before bed. Now, are we going to actually come up with a solution? I thought we should. So my
Mhm.
husband would be like, all right, I'm going to bed. And he would roll over and start snoring. And I was sitting there like, we can't go to bed angry. I'm like wanting to jostle him awake. I'm like crying loudly, these big sobs, like, I need you to pay attention to me. I'm upset, right? And he would just be like pulling his hair out. Like, you're insane. I need to sleep. And I would journal. I mean, I lost so much sleep until one day I was like, why is this so hard for me? Like, I get it that somebody gave us the advice, don't go to bed angry, but I think we're past that at this point. Like, obviously, something happens inside of me that is crazy when you go to bed and I'm still upset. And so I started to think about it and I was like, this activates all of my abandonment issues. Like, really, like, what's happening in my head? I'm like, he's going to wake up and go, I am married to a lunatic, which I like. Him going to bed when I was still upset turned me into a lunatic, like, very much. I get it. But I was like, he's going to wake up and be like, this is insane. I'm get dressed and never come back. Right. Like, I was like ready for the divorce proceedings. I was like, we're never going to work it out. He's never going to apologize. Like, I'm never going to get to talk about why I'm sad. And so, like, I realized, like, okay, all of my abandonment issues are being triggered right now. And so I told him one time, I was like, hey, listen, I get it. We're both tired. Maybe this isn't the best time to talk about it, but I feel so abandoned and unloved when you just turn over and go to bed and we haven't talked about anything. And he's like, oh, I get it. Okay. So what if I say, hey, love, I really love you and I'm not going anywhere, but right now I'm way too tired to talk about this. Let's revisit it in the morning. I was like, that would work. So that's what we did for years. If we got into an argument late at night, he would say something to that effect. I mean, it shortened over time, right? But I was like, cool. I know that he loves me. I know he's not going to wake up in the morning and like get dressed and take off. Like, I can just chill. Like, I can regulate my nervous system and just go to sleep. And guess what happened? Every morning, and this has been for 23 years, every morning he rolls over, gives me like the most amazing snuggles. And if we were fighting right before bed, he'd say, hey, I'm so sorry I was really irritated last night. Like, I love you. I'm sorry, and sometimes I'm like, I don't even know what we're fighting about. I love you too. Like, let's have a great day. Or sometimes I'd be like, yeah, you said some things that really hurt my feelings and I'd love to talk about it for a minute. And we do. But what's really important is say that you're going to talk about it in the morning and then actually follow through. That's really important. But go to bed angry? Yes, please. If you're in like in an upset state and you're irritable and your partner is just like the most annoying person you've ever known, please just sleep on it. And I promise you'll think more clearly, you'll have more perspective, and you'll be able to come up with a way better solution in the morning.
I love that because you're taking the advice of sleep on it, which is normally not spoken in the context of relationships, but it is with big decisions, and just swapping
Right.
out the bad advice with that. And where that also is very helpful for people is it allows them space to get out of reactivity and go into responding, which is where we're like actually using our prefrontal cortex and not just saying irrational things and flying off the handle. So I love that you have a piece of advice to replace that with. Is there another terrible piece of marriage advice that you can like swap out with rational advice?
Let's think. Oh, I love this one because this is a really easy, like, quippy thing that a lot of people say. Oh, like, tell me if you've heard this. Don't sweat the small stuff.
Yep.
I hear it all the time. Don't sweat the small stuff. Where do you think the big stuff comes from? It doesn't start big, it starts small. So, of course, you should sweat the small stuff. You should learn how to communicate the small stuff well, skillfully, but definitely sweat it, because if you don't deal with it when it's a seed, you're going to have to deal with it when it's a weed. And so, whenever I hear don't sweat the small stuff, I'm like, what? Yes, you should definitely sweat the small stuff.
That's awesome. Is there any bad advice as it pertains to intimacy in marriages?
Mm, yeah, my favorite, which is a chapter in the book, is A good wife keeps her husband satisfied. And I feel like that wraps up so much of the really bad advice that we get as women. Like, women shouldn't have needs, they shouldn't have desires. They're just there to take care of their husband. If they don't do it, somebody else will, or their husband will stray, or they'll be in a bad mood, or all of the ors, right? So,
Mhm.
like, a good wife just gives it to her husband when he wants it.
Staying on that, um, what do you say to couples who have lost that intimate spark, who've, getting into roommate syndrome? I wanted to talk about that and walking that back. How do you recover the intimacy?
Yeah. So I'll tell you, dealing with all of that bad advice that a good wife takes care of her husband or makes sure that he's satisfied or all of that, there's a lot that goes into that. So that's not like an easy quick, like, replace it with a different thing type advice. Like, the way I like to talk about that is it's like a garden. So when you're young, you got all these ideas planted in your garden about who you are, your sexuality, what makes a good woman, what makes a good man, what your bodies should look like, how sex should work. And so, as a kid, you don't have any control about what's planted in your garden. It's like you get messages from your family of origin, from your church leaders, from society as a whole, from Hollywood, all the different places, right? And so your job as an adult in a long-term committed relationship like marriage is to now go through and pull the weeds out, right? You've got to pull the weeds, till that garden, and then plant flowers, seeds, flowers, vegetables, and fruits that will actually bless your relationship. And that is a long process, and a process that, should be done with care and love, self-actualization, maybe the help of a coach. And it happens over time. So, and it's not something I think that ever just gets finished. You're always weeding your garden. You're always, aware of the bad messages that come in. You got to pluck those weeds while they're small and keep, planting and replanting the good, fulfilling messages. So that's really important. But you asked about roommate syndrome and, like,
Mhm.
couples who get in a rut. And that's another piece of advice, is that your relationship will just be there after the busy seasons, right? So a lot of couples get into this roommate syndrome, where they're busy doing, building up their careers, making money, raising their kids. And so they stop kind of tending to the relationship, which is very dangerous. And so absolutely, there's a way to keep the spark there, but you have to recognize that you have to be intentional, even in the really busy seasons of life and marriage. So I give people three really important pieces of advice, and this accrues to 3% of your time. And so I love to do the math on this because people are just like blown away. But there's 1,440 minutes in a day. And here's the thing about time, is nobody gets more and nobody gets less. You can't pay for more time. Doesn't matter how much money you make, how important your friends are, how much you can bench press. Nobody gets more time than anybody else. It's how you choose to use that time. So, of the 1,440 minutes in a day, if you will commit to spending 20 of those minutes, which leaves you 1,420 minutes, 20 of those minutes talking to your partner, learning about their inner worlds, asking them questions, not like, what'd you do today, but like, how did you feel today? What did you learn today? What's really exciting to you? What stresses you out? Is there anything I can do to make your life easier? Like, what are you reading? Who is your favorite friend to talk to? Right? Like, what interview did you do that you just absolutely lit you up? Those types of questions for 20 minutes a day, that is going to do wonders for your connection. And then there's 168 hours in every person's week. Nobody gets more, nobody gets less. But if you will spend 3 of those 168 hours with your partner doing something fun, which I like to call date night, You get that advice all the time, but it's so important. That opportunity to reconnect like teenagers, like you're dating again, right? Like get curious about your partner. Do something super fun that, maybe makes you feel silly or makes you smile or, creates memories together. Doesn't have to be expensive or elaborate or far from home. One of my favorite date nights with my husband is going for a walk and getting a treat. Like I love doing that, right? So like doesn't have to be super expensive, but do something out of the ordinary. Do something that you enjoy. Get a card game that you like to play together and play after the kids go to bed. 3 hours a week. And then last but not least, there's 52 weeks in a year. If you will take one of those weeks and take a vacation, just the two of you, to a romantic destination, doesn't have to be expensive. You can go camping. You can go to a friend's house who's out of town, figure it out, but spend that time reconnecting as a couple, not a mom and dad, a couple. You will safeguard your relationship. So if you can do that even in the busy seasons of your life, you will stay connected.
And like you said, you don't even have to spend money. It's just that's a way to actually take initiative and make your partner feel prioritized.
And it's literally 3% of your time. 3%. Is that crazy?
It's so digestible when you put the figures on it because I've not heard it necessarily put that way before.
Yeah.
Do you notice any kind of difference between men and women as far as are there tells that a woman has checked out of a relationship that are different than the tells that a man has checked out?
That's a really interesting question. And nobody's ever asked me that before. So let me think about that because, I think women, when they start to they'll either let themselves go or they'll pay extra special attention to what they look like. A lot
Mm-hmm.
of what women do when they're dissatisfied in the relationship is physical. So they'll either like totally let themselves go so their spouse is no longer attracted to them, or they'll make themselves look really nice and try to like attract the attention of somebody outside of the marriage. And I've noticed with men, typically they'll withdraw. It's kind of a man thing to just totally withdraw. They'll fall really deeply into that happy wife, happy life thing, but it's not in a good way. It's not like, I want my wife to be happy. It's like I don't have a say here. I don't give a crap anymore. Like she can just do it. And then they resent it. So I have noticed men tend to step away in like a really withdrawn, like kind of passive aggressive way.
I'm wondering what the avenues are for reconnecting when a couple has kind of like let it fester and let it get really bad. Let's say they're in the busy era, they haven't prioritized each other. Maybe it's been years. And I unfortunately know couples like this that all of a sudden a year passes and they're like, oh my God, we haven't had sex in a year. It didn't even register for them. Like, what are digestible tactics to come back to each other when you've been disconnected for so long?
Yeah, I think that 3%, starting with any one of those 3% of your time things, like either start connecting daily, start connecting weekly, or start connecting yearly, whichever one of those is the most plausible for you in the moment, start doing that. But then really just, inviting your partner to choose into the relationship. Like, talking to your spouse, like, hey, I really miss us. I really miss spending time with you and being intimate with you, sharing my dreams with you. So I would love it if we could set up 20 minutes where we can talk, in the evenings, whether that's right after dinner or after we put the kids to bed or first thing in the morning before everybody's awake. I would love to connect with you during the days. I just want to hear from you. Starting those date nights, like, hey, listen, I would love to start doing date nights. Like I'll plan the whole thing. You don't have to worry about anything. Like if you're the one who's like initiating that, that would be awesome. Like think about you're like, hey, I got my parents to watch the kids this weekend so that we could just, go do something, just the two of us. You know, I'd love your input on something you really like, or I remember that you really liked to do this thing. And so I scheduled it for us to be able to do it on Friday night. Any of those things. And then, also we've talked about it in this episode as well, is just saying like, hey, the reality is in order to fix the relationship, there's things you can do on your own, but to really create a thriving, healthy relationship, you need both partners to come to the table. So you always have that option of saying, I'd like to get some help with our relationship. I've scheduled, I'd like you to join me next week. And if, in a loving way, say like, I want our relationship to be really rewarding for both me and for you. And so this is, how I think would be really good for us. And if they're not up for it, then you just start, kind of like, okay, well, until you're willing to work on the relationship with me in some way, shape, or form, I won't be cooking dinner. So I won't be folding laundry. I won't be sleeping in your bed. I won't be, whatever. So it's just really important to go to your spouse, let them know there's something that you want to work on, that you would like their participation, and you just go from there. But you've got to do it from a loving, not an angry or passive aggressive space, because there is a difference.
And it does take that initiative either way. It's like someone has to buckle and be the one to bring it up, and hopefully that opens the pathways to actually working on it.
It's so true. And I teach this concept called relationship ecology.
Mm.
So a lot of people are like, well, why do I have to go first? Right. So if there's somebody out there and they're listening to this podcast and they're like, why should I be the one that like goes first and like has to figure all of this out? Right. And it's the kind of the same as like, why would you pick up garbage out of your front yard? Like you didn't put it there, but it's your front yard. It's where you live. So you're going to pick up garbage and throw it away because it's your house and you want to keep it nice, right? And so this is your relationship, you live in it. So you're doing it because garbage or resentment or issues in your marriage are polluting the space that you live in. So be the one who goes first. Yes, it's hard, but it's absolutely worth it.
You've been working in this field for a long time. Is there any novel changes to divorce trends that you're seeing? Is there less than there was 10 years ago? Is there more?
It's hard because I mostly talk to the couples that are dissatisfied, right? And I have noticed that, and this is an awesome trend, I actually like it, that women are speaking up. It's like the woman who is saying, like, hey, I can support myself. Like, I have my own income and my own. And so, I'm not going to settle for this relationship where I don't have a voice. And so, a lot of times, well, it's hard because a lot of times it's the woman who's speaking up that they're not happy, but most of my clients or the couples that come and see me are initiated by the man. So
Mm.
I don't know that I can say one way or the other, but I do like the idea that couples are coming to get help. I think that's really, really important instead of suffering in silence. There is this statistic that couples wait 6 years in an unhappy marriage before they look for help.
Wow.
I don't think, I don't know this for certain, but I don't think couples are willing to be miserable for 6 years anymore. Like, I think that people are now looking for help or they're looking to get out of the relationship. And you would hope that they would stop and try to get some help before just dissolving the relationship.
Can we end on a piece of good marriage advice?
Yes. Good marriage advice. I mean, the best marriage advice is to learn how to communicate with each other well. Recognize that a good marriage makes room for two people, and that two people are choosing to give their best to each other and create a life together. So I guess my best marriage advice would be to get curious, get vulnerable, and create your happily ever after love story.
Monica Tanner, this has been such a valuable conversation. If people want to work with you, how do they learn more?
Well, thank you so much for asking. So, my website is my name, monicatanner.com. There you can find all my free resources like my podcast, Secrets of Happily Ever After, all of my social media stuff. And then my book, which comes out in August, has its own website, which is badmarriageadvice.com. And so there you can find all the information about when the book's coming out. I also have a little course that goes with the book. So you can definitely go to monicatanner.com or badmarriageadvice.com to learn more.
Amazing. I'll plug all of that in the show notes. Thank you so much for coming on and doing the show.
Thank you.
And thank you, everybody, for listening. Bye.